Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 21st, 2017. Summer solstice. Happy summer solstice, all you pagan bastards. I don't know why you would be bastards. Why can't you just be regular pagans? I don't know. You're perfectly legitimately born pagans, as far as I'm concerned. You don't need to worry about that with me. Are there any pagans? There might be pagans in the audience. I've totally offended you. And now I've messed it up, because what if some of you are born out of wedlock? I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's a long day. Wow, it feels like a long day here. Okay, whew, sweating under the lights here. I'm sorry, everybody. Anyway, I enjoy the summer solstice. I like the idea of the longest daylight day of the year, even though I don't usually get to enjoy it all the way to the end anyway. But, I don't know. Somehow I get too busy to just sort of enjoy those last hours of sunlight. Although I have been peeking at, some live cams. I never know why these things are available on the internet, just because everything is. But live cams in Iceland. Greg, I believe, told us, Greg Dworkin, who'll join us shortly, that he's going to Iceland later this summer. We're going to go next year, and excitement mounting for that one. I just was looking at the live cam showing how light it stays during the, what would ordinarily be evening hours here at home. Reykjavik only has about 2 hours, 3 hours of darkness, and it's not even particularly dark. And then, of course, northern Iceland is just living with the midnight sun. I looked at some of the interesting webcams here. It's just amazing to me. It's something everyone should experience. If you can afford to pick yourself up and haul your butt all the way into the Arctic Circle, by all means, go ahead and do it. But if you have to work for a living, okay, fine. You can just stay up late with the rest of us and turn the lights on and pretend it's midnight sun. I don't know. It sounds like a really special experience. I would love to try it. I was in Reykjavik briefly a couple of years ago. It didn't stay light around the clock at the moment that I was there, and I don't think it ever really does stay bright daylight around the clock in Reykjavik, but I don't know. I'm obsessed with the sunlight this morning. I don't know what it is, but I guess I could be obsessing about other things, except that, I don't know. I have not seen, and maybe I've been trying to consciously avoid watching the Donald Trump tweet storms in the morning, but I think they've had some relatively, I think they've had a relative success in cutting down on his tweeting, and I think maybe it had something to do with the fact that, his own supporters, Donald Trump's own supporters, were sort of begging him to stay off of the Twitter machine and stop giving himself problems that he didn't need. And maybe it has to do with the fact that he's actually in some appears to be in some legal trouble, and other people who advise him are likewise in legal trouble. Everyone is lawyering up. The big news yesterday on that front was that our Attorney General has had to hire an attorney specific, as I did see someone else tweet. That's the headline. Attorney General hires attorney specific. And maybe that has had the effect of talking the president into laying off of the Twitter machine a little bit. His son hasn't stopped, and sometimes I have to do a double take to see whether it's Donald Trump or Donald Trump Jr. tweeting. It's like he has his own parody account in Donald Trump Jr. Donald Trump Jr. this morning tweeting triumphantly about the results in the special election yesterday. You will all likely have heard the results already. Karen Handel did hold on to win that Republican district that has been Republican for nearly 40 years by a narrow margin. And so we could talk a little bit about what it means to have that kind of Democratic performance in that district. But anyway, it's been real interesting watching him tweet this morning that Karen Handel becomes the first woman rep Georgia has sent to Congress. And now there's some debate on as to whether Donald Trump Jr. meant Republican or representative, as most people view it when you type it in that context. Karen Handel is the first woman rep, whatever that means, Georgia has sent to Congress. Still waiting for the glass ceiling stories, or do conservatives not get them? Of course, there have been several women elected to Congress from Georgia in the past, and I guess he just didn't really feel like that needed to be looked up. But yes, others out there defending him, insisting that rep means Republican as opposed to representative. If only there were some three-letter Twitter-friendly abbreviation for Republican that someone could use in order to clear things up like that. I wonder if anybody cares about that. I doubt it very much. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here with the news that we do care about, and lots of it. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm in for a lot of sunlight. How about you?
Good. We like sunlight.
Yeah, nothing we can do about it. But.
Right. So it's Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
And we had some elections yesterday. We should definitely talk about that, but there's other stuff to talk about too. Let me just get to some stuff because otherwise we'll never get to it. So this is from Axios, a blow to U.S. auto workers. Profit margins for sales of compact cars in the U.S. are thin, so it makes little sense for Ford to expand production of the Focus, that's the name of the car, the Focus with a capital F, in the U.S., but when such cars are built in Mexico rather than China, they're typically sourced with American-made auto parts, supporting at least some domestic employment. The vast majority of parts for Chinese-built cars are made in China.
Okay. Well,
right? Why is that important? Because Ford is moving the plant to China.
Oh.
Because Trump told them not to move it to Mexico.
Well, they listened.
They did.
That's right.
To the disadvantage of American workers.
All right. Well,
so Rick Wilson tweeted this story and basically said, you poor dumb voters, you believed Donald Trump when he told you this fairy tale. So, there's that. That is a problem.
Okay.
And that's something we should focus on. The other thing that we should definitely focus on and keep focusing on is the American Health Care Act. As it makes its way through the Senate, supposedly tomorrow, Thursday, they're going to actually have a copy of the bill and then get a CBO score back on Monday, and then they vote next week. At least that's Mitch McConnell's plan. When you go through all of the different things that people have said, it's the usual moderates in the usual situation. Murkowski's not happy with it from Alaska. Susan Collins is not happy with it from Maine. Complaints here, complaints there. Rand Paul doesn't like it. It's not conservative enough. Doesn't cut enough people. Doesn't hurt enough people. So it's not clear that they have the 50 votes, but the odds are that they will. And we'll see. The other thought that has never gone away is that McConnell just wants a vote and he doesn't care whether he wins or loses. He'd rather win, but he wants it off the table. And so it may be that that's the case. Margaret Sanger Katz, who's a New York Times healthcare expert at Upshot, tweets this. Caitlin Nowens reports the Senate bill will allow states to waive more and different rules than the House until the birdbath. Yes. Which ACA regulations will be covered in the state waivers? Essential health benefits, it'll list the 10 services insurers must cover. The medical loss ratio, the regulation of how much premium income insurance must spend on patient claims. That is to say, how much profit can they take? The age rating band, the requirement that premiums for older people be no more than 3 times the amount of premiums charged to younger people. In other words, if that's gone and it's waived, older people have to pay more. The actuarial value, or the requirement that plans cover a certain percentage of a person's total health care costs. Among other things, the lifetime caps, even if you work for employer-sponsored insurance, ESI, is very much at risk. Okay. The Senate bill would give states sweeping a new authority to opt out of federal insurance standards established by the Affordable Care Act. Congressional aide said in that way it appears to go further than the House-passed bill in giving states latitude to regulate the health insurance markets. And it builds on a section of the Affordable Care Act that allows states to obtain waivers, but would relax many of the requirements for such waivers that Democrats wrote into the law. Republican senators are still discussing exactly which standards could be waived. That is to say, Mitch McConnell and his staff, because it doesn't seem like anybody else is getting input. Mm-hmm. Many Republicans want to allow states to prescribe a more limited, less expensive package of health benefits than is required under Affordable Care Act. Republicans disagree on whether states should be able to allow insurance to set higher premiums for some people with pre-existing conditions. So that's at risk as well. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, we know that what's being suggested in the Senate is in some ways not better and maybe worse than what's in the House.
Yeah, the emerging picture is that it's horrible.
Yeah, but the question on the table for you is this bird bath thing. That is to say, if they do that, it's going to affect the price of the bill. So are these draconian things in there so that they can get this done under reconciliation? At this point, given that the House has passed something, does the Byrd rules mean that you're looking for some outside standard of whether or not costs go up like over a 10-year period, or is it that you have to match what the House did?
You're not under any obligation to match what the House did in terms of policy or even their. I mean, I guess that there's one. Because
I read somewhere it was something about it has to save at least as much money as the House did, and I didn't understand that.
I'm not 100% clear on exactly what they thought they were getting at. Here's my concern is I've not ever seen it said that there was a Byrd rule requirement that the Senate save as much money as the House did, because of course sometimes the House won't go first necessarily on these things, but also. I think what happened there was what there is a requirement that the reconciliation bill save as much as, at least as much as demanded in the budget resolution. There are specific instructions about which committees are to act and then what their actions are supposed to be. And they're very generalized, and it's often just a dollar target that the committees have to meet. And I think what may have happened here is the House met those targets, and then the rule got interpreted at the journalism stage as meaning, well, they have to save just as much. Well, they have to save as much as the House saved because the House had to meet this target, and they also have to meet this other target that has nothing to do with the House having achieved this level of savings. It's just that they achieved the minimum necessary according to the budget resolution, and the Senate has to do the same.
Okay, so that helps explain a little bit, or maybe we can nail this down too, because the other thing that people throw around, and this is why I'm quizzing the expert here, sorry about that, is you'll read stuff that says, and they're also under time pressure because they have to get this done under this year's resolution, because if they pass a new one, then there's new rules that they have to deal with. And that changes everything.
Yes, that's another.
Can we explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, I dissent from that view, but I've never been
right. But it's a common one, though.
Yes, and I think it's the standard interpretation and the one that parliamentarians are likely to rely on. If I were a parliamentarian, I might talk about whether you could widen that a little bit, but I'm not, and I won't be. But again, this goes back to reconciliation. That special procedure. You should always ask every time you deal with reconciliation and you realize, of course, people are using it in order to get this protection from the filibuster. Keep in mind that there's this special, easier procedure, and there must be there are penalties, or requirements for being able to use it. It's not just a free pass that once a year you get to avoid the filibuster. You have to meet these requirements. One of the requirements is that you have to follow instructions written into the budget resolution. And then ordinarily there's a new budget resolution put forward each year, and the current budget resolution is the instructions they're working under, trying to get this thing moved forward now, trying to use reconciliation. Pretty soon, if they were to not use it or not get this bill through or delay it for whatever reason, pretty soon you're going to start to see, well, at the beginning of next year, really, is you would start to see them working on the next budget resolution and maybe including reconciliation instructions. And it is widely held to be the case that when a new budget resolution is adopted and it either has new reconciliation instructions or has none in it at all, that the authorization to use reconciliation has now expired. You currently have a live budget out there controlling at this moment, and it has reconciliation instructions in it. Once you pass a new one, it controls, and even if you didn't use reconciliation that you were entitled to use from the last budget, you don't get to just, it doesn't travel with, you don't roll, it's not like rollover minutes, I guess is the best way to explain it. Although, I really don't know why. I mean, it doesn't obviate the previous budget. It was passed by Congress, adopted in both houses, and the fact that they haven't used it, to me, doesn't really, I don't feel like it should necessarily expire. Some cases it's really good that it does because it talks Republicans out of doing something horrible, but there
it is.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that at least helps us give a big framework for it. Now, I'm going to use the whole concept of what the GOP is doing with the healthcare bill writ large to then segue into Georgia 6. And the reason that I'm doing it that way is because there was the Democrats are outraged about getting the Affordable Care Act, that is to say Obamacare, repealed, losing a lot of the protections that we now have, throwing 23 million people off of insurance and all the other stuff that potentially could happen if this goes through. And of course, part of the deal is to put pressure on the moderates, such as they are. Not that any of the Republican senators are moderate. We don't trust them. We think that in the end, Susan Collins will say she's troubled and then go ahead and vote for whatever the Mitch McConnell piece is. But it's always possible, if there's more than a couple, that they could band together and not do it quite in that way. So that is entirely possible. However, there was a nice piece written by James Hohmann before Georgia 6, that is to say the day before yesterday, which is part of his Power Post Washington Post series, which is excellent. I read it every day. It says, most Republicans in the Georgia special election are willing to give Trump care a chance. And that's certainly worthy keeping in mind when you look at the results. And what he writes is Obamacare has been front and center in Republican campaign commercials for the past 4 election cycles, but it's been absent from the airways ahead of today's special election in Georgia's 6th district. Most of the GOP spots have focused on national security. Relentless barrage of attacks they had sought to define Democratic candidate John Ossoff, 30, as inexperienced and liberal carpetbagger who would be a puppet of Nancy Pelosi. The carpetbagger is kind of silly because he grew up there. And Karen Hales from D.C. I don't think that for all the talk about it, that made much of a difference. But they definitely did their normal Nancy Pelosi, San Francisco values things that they've used for years and years and years. Right. And Hohmann says it's ironic because the neck-and-neck race to replace Tom Price, who resigned to become Secretary of Health and Human Services, is played out against the backdrop of Congress finally considering a repeal of the 2010 law, which we were just talking about.
That one.
Senate Republicans are forging ahead with plans to hold a vote next week. Democrats are now using every procedural trick available to slow the chamber to a crawl so they can draw attention to the secretive process being used to advance the legislation. Now, a process that is of any kind, secret or otherwise, is never going to be something that voters turn on. Voters never say, oh, I don't like this process. I'm going to vote for X because of it.
Unless it's got a funny name like filibuster.
Yeah, but they don't make their vote. Yeah. They don't choose who to vote for or not vote for, let's say, on a special election yesterday based on process. The purpose of the process that the Democrats are doing is simply to call media attention to the fact that the Republicans are doing this bill and they're trying to hide what's in it because if you found out, you'd hate it. That's really the point. Not so much to say, oh, you should hate Republicans because they didn't follow procedure or they're doing a procedure that's really icky. It's because what they're doing is hiding what's in the bill, and when you find out about it, you ain't gonna like it. Yeah. So when you find out about it and you don't like it, remember we told you that this was going on. Don't blame us. That's basically the thought process. But in any case, politically it's sensible for GOP outside groups to steer clear of the issue. An Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll found that just 1/4 of likely voters in the costliest House race in U.S. history approve of the Republicans' American Health Care Act. That is to say, people in the district did not like what the Republicans are doing. But here's where the part that I wanted to bring in comes.
Oh.
The polling doesn't capture the full story. In dozens of interviews on the ground over 3 days, most Republicans and many independents who have concerns about the House bill stress they detest Obamacare. Their expectations might seem unreasonable to anybody who's closely following the debate or is steeped in the complexities of public policy, but they believe that Donald Trump can and should enact a replacement plan that will both reduce costs and improve their quality of care. In other words, Trump has promised them he's going to increase services and lower taxes, and they still believe him,
Yes.
even though they hate what the Republicans are doing. And what they're saying is, I get that this bill sucks. I get that the Republicans in Congress suck. But Trump said he's going to fix it, and that's okay for me, because if we send more Republicans to Congress, it'll help him fix it, even though Congress is doing something that we hate. Now, you don't have to agree with the logic. You don't even have to consider it logical. But that was the thought process. And it's one of the many reasons why it's a little difficult to flip Republicans.
Well, yeah. That was difficult it's a difficult thing to do.
Well, it turned out to be difficult to do. And here's some interesting stats about what happened yesterday in Georgia. Did you know there was also a special in South Carolina?
I did, but I only barely knew that. I admit to having been mostly in the dark about that one.
Because it wasn't really well covered, and so there wasn't a lot of outside money there, and there wasn't a lot of outside process there. And it was a place where the Republican was expected to coast. And guess what? Did you know that the South Carolina, which was a win for the Republican, was actually a closer race than Georgia 6?
I didn't, but I did.
Ralph Norman, the
become aware of
Republican,
its existence.
51.1%. Archie Parnell, the Democrat, 47.9%. Prior to the election, the pundits suggested anything less than a 10-point win for Norman, the Republican. Anything less than that would signal trouble for Republicans. And in fact, it was a 3.2% race there. Whereas Georgia, again, Karen Handel won 51.9, John Ossoff 48.1. Mm-hmm. So it was a 3.8 race. So South Carolina was actually closer than Georgia 6. They were both close. And the polls weren't wrong about these things. Ossoff had a lead going into the last week. The last three polls showed, either a tie or Handel ahead. And the Real Clear Politics average, by the way, there's been a change at Huffington Post. They fired a lot of people. Among the many people they fired are the data inputters for HuffPost Pollster. So there aren't as many outside of Trump approval. You can't use HuffPost Pollster as much for a lot of the special stuff. So Real Clear Politics is where we're going for this. And they had Handel ahead by something like 0.2%. But the point was the trend was toward her the last week. I predicted prior to the election yesterday morning it was going to be a 2-point win. It was a 3-point something win, so not that far off. And it turned out that Ossoff did quite well, relatively speaking. And if you look at how Democrats had done in various elections in that district, presidential and so forth over the last few years, it's been higher and higher and higher. Democratic numbers didn't quite get to 50. People were hoping that he would, but it's actually a pretty decent overall showing, which of course is not going to be the way that it's played this morning. It's going to be a disaster for Democrats because everything's a disaster for Democrats.
Yes.
It's not. It was a very, very good showing, but a very disappointing one, no doubt about that. And so I'm going to turn to one of the professionals here who does this for a living, Nathan Gonzalez, used to be partnered with Stu Rothenberg. Stu went off to Washington Post, and Nathan is still here at Inside Elections at Roll Call. And he's got a piece here, 11 things I think, after the Georgia and South Carolina special elections. It's short, 11 isn't that long, and I think it's helpful to just put the whole thing in perspective.
Okay.
Ready? It's
yes.
written, but it's kind of like a tweet storm.
Okay, I am currently now ready.
All right. Gives you a chance to get coffee. So the House majority was at risk before the Georgia special election, and it's at risk after the Georgia special election. In other words, this didn't change a whole lot about the dynamics of what's going on. Mm-hmm. Okay. Glenn Bolger, veteran GOP pollster, pointed out that presidents with a job approval rating below 50, and Trump is at 40, have seen party lose an average of 40 seats in midterm elections. Trump's at 40, and so past doesn't dictate future. Republicans might gloat over winning another battle, but they could easily still lose the 2018 war. That hasn't changed based on yesterday's results. In fact, if anything, the South Carolina one reminds us that things aren't all that great for the Republicans, even when they win in ruby red districts by tiny amounts of points. Okay. Number 2, Republicans found their 2018 message.
They did.
Nancy Pelosi, San Francisco values.
I've heard this one before.
Yeah, big part of what delivered a victory for Karen Handel by turning out base GOP voters. But these voters, particularly Trump supporters, who we'll get to, may not be as open to that message next year if they believe congressional Republicans are as much to blame for blocking Trump's agenda. Republicans also pounded the 30-year-old former Capitol Hill staffer, they meant, for putting up his national security credentials and being weak in the fight against ISIS. But next year, Republicans will be facing a platoon of retired military veterans in districts around the country, and that won't prevent Republicans from trying to use the attack. May not resonate quite as well, particularly if we're a shooting war in Syria, and the Republicans screw up. I'm adding that last part. So things that work now, and again, that's an overall theme too. Things that work now may not necessarily work in 2018 and vice versa. Take the Russia thing. We'll get to that one. But, you may look, Chris Murphy said something yesterday, my senator, about Russia is a distraction. We should stick to healthcare. It's not a distraction. It's a big deal. People really care about it. There's a CBS poll out showing that Trump's very low approval rating in the mid-30s is partially due to the whole Russia thing. But it hasn't ripened. There isn't a specific smoking gun. There isn't a thing that you can say, look, he did this and everybody agrees on it. And until that happens, it's not going to be a weaponized thing that's going to change an election. There's rarely one thing that does. That's another piece I'll get to. But at the same time, it is background. So a lot of the stuff that's necessarily true now is not necessarily true in 2018. And that's true with the healthcare thing that we were talking about. Once it passes, there's a whole lot more to run on than I don't know what they're doing, which is very hard to make, TV ads about. Another funny thing that people pointed out, Georgia is not an expansion state for Medicaid rather.
Okay.
So because it's not an expansion state for Medicaid, you couldn't run on these guys are trying to take away something that they never gave you in the first place. It would have been different if it was Nevada or another place that they had expanded, Ohio, because then you're taking away something. There wasn't anything to take because they never expanded. So that played into it a little bit as well. Just makes the messaging a little bit more difficult.
Yes, that's true. So not necessarily the same atmosphere in which many others will be playing in 2018. Not a whole lot. There weren't a whole lot of Republican expansion states, but there are a few.
Well, the ones that are, Rob Portman in Ohio and
with temperatures
Dean Heller in Nevada. Those are the senators that are under the gun in terms of not necessarily going along with what Mitch McConnell is doing. Yes. So very important there. So here's point number 3. Victory bought congressional Republicans some time, but the window's closing to get stuff done. And that's talking about the congressional stuff. Number 4, it's possible for Democrats to lose special elections in Kansas, Montana, and even suburban Atlanta and still have momentum. And we'll have to see how much money is raised and so on and so forth. Don't forget, although this was a very expensive race, a lot of the money that was raised for Ossoff was us. It was the grassroots. It was the netroots.
Right.
So, will that continue? Are we still pissed? Yeah, we are. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. We'll see, and we'll see how much more money. We got some time to save up our money. And
right. We'll skip number 5 because it's Nathan Gonzalez talking to himself saying, I picked a bad time to go on vacation since I won't be here Wednesday. Number 6, the 2016 presidential results might be the exception rather than the new rule. The Democrats' excitement about Georgia 6 began with Trump's narrow 48-47% victory over Clinton, but Mitt Romney carried at 61-38. And then again, we had Price, who won easily. It's Newt Gingrich's old district, so on and so forth. And so maybe that's not the right target to compare yourself to. Number 7, Republicans deserve credit for navigating a handful of volatile special elections. Trump skipped the traditional honeymoon. He's a polarizing figure. The 3 of the special elections, Kansas, Montana, and South Carolina, were in Trump country. But still, they didn't blow it. So you got to give them credit for that.
Yes. Okay.
Number 8, complaining about money's getting old. Republicans were beside themselves because Ossoff could raise money. So what? Both did. It's going to happen. Number 9, Donald Trump is still the president and he's fueling Democratic enthusiasm. That part's not going away. Number 10, stop looking for the perfect candidate. Some Democrats are blaming Ossoff's lack of a residency in the 6th district, which I said yesterday is going to be used as an excuse, but that's got nothing to do with why he lost. Or being the star of too many of his own campaign ads, or not having a long enough resume. Handel wasn't perfect either. In some ways, a longtime politician was an ideal opponent and contrast for Democrats. He was actually a very good candidate for the district, and he made very, very few errors. The reason he didn't win comes down to there were more Republicans than Democrats there. And in that situation, just like in Kansas and Montana, it's just extraordinarily difficult for a Democrat to win. Number 11, political handicapping is a humbling profession. How honest am I supposed to be? We've had the race rated as a toss-up for weeks. I believe Ossoff had a narrow advantage because majority of the quantitative and qualitative evidence, I said, pointed in that direction. But I had another half a dozen takeaways partially rewritten in case he won. I threw them away. Now tonight's results in South Carolina and Georgia are reasons why I love this, because each election is different enough to be keeping people on their toes. So my takeaway from that, I'll add a number 12, is that when you have a close election, whatever it is you thought before the election was reinforced by the results, no matter what those results are.
That's likely true.
Yeah, if you thought that the whole problem with Democrats is they're too centrist, well, this proves it. If you thought that the whole problem was that Democrats are raising their expectations about winning in ruby red places, then this matches what is going on. I mean, whatever it is you thought, if you thought Bernie would have won, this is it. I mean, this just proves it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, whatever you thought, the election results don't change that one bit. That's, one of the fascinating things about human nature.
Yes. Well, everyone hedged their bets pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I think they did. It was a close race.
Right.
And everybody said it was a close race, and it turned out to be a relatively close race. And by the way, under the radar, South Carolina was even closer.
I wonder if I imagine, I'm certain that they're standing around saying, why no one paid attention to, why didn't they? Look what happened. Look at the money that went into Georgia. But,
Right.
It's different situations somewhat, I'm sure. But, sometimes you miss out on the wave. Although we were the wave. There was
we were
probably
excited.
pretty good
These were small
why.
dollar donations. We were happy to do it. It helps build the Democratic Party in Georgia. We'll do better next time. I think it's all good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take it. I mean, I have to. I have no choice. Right. It's there.
And then finally, a couple of pieces here that I think are worthwhile in regard to just overall tribalism and trying to think about what's going on here. There's a really good piece by pollster Kristen Soltis Anderson. She's a Republican pollster. And it's called There's No Such Thing as Trump's Base.
Oh.
And it's in the Washington Examiner. And I think it's really worth, do I have that on your list? If I don't,
Let's see.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay.
It's actually the second one down. There's no counting the number of times the media has asked, will this be the thing that drives Donald Trump supporters away from him? Is this finally the time? Be it Russia or what's going on with healthcare in Congress or whether or not it's the emoluments thing or whatever the Syrian escalation, whatever it is. Will this be the thing? During the campaign, it was incessant. He insults the opponents, the Access Hollywood tapes, political incorrectness. Once he was elected, the focus shifted to his appointments and proposals, choosing Goldman Sachs people, bombing Syria, proposing a budget that cuts social program spending. Whatever the president's decision is good or bad, and whether it is good or bad, the action justifiable or appalling. The question's always, is this the thing? That's like saying, is this the day he became president? Is this the pivot that we've been waiting for?
Yeah, actually, we haven't heard that very much anymore. Maybe is the day he went silent on Twitter the pivot we've been waiting.
Yeah,
for.
and he finally became president.
Yes.
Maybe when he's impeached will be the day he finally became president because you can only impeach the president anymore.
That's a
I don't
good
know.
point. I would try that.
Something like that. Whether the president's decision is good or bad, the action, whatever, was this the thing? She says, coming from the polling world, I've long since stopped expecting any one thing is the thing that'll dramatically shift Trump's numbers downward.
That's the thing right there.
That's the thing. I think it's an important concept.
Yeah. Well,
Just
okay.
the Russia thing, it erodes. It doesn't sweep you away. it erodes the base.
I see.
Pounding the waves against the cliff, and sooner or later, a couple hundred years, the cliff will erode. It's not that, one wave will just take the whole cliff down. That's not usually how it works.
Yeah.
So she says, there's exciting new research out. If you're a pollster, it's exciting. Out on just who comprises Trump's coalition. Mm-hmm. I believe, she says, that part of the resilience of Trump's numbers, and remember, we're talking about low numbers. We're talking about him 40. It's just, why doesn't it drop too much more? Well, it does. It drops to 35, 36, but doesn't go below that. So he's got a range of 36 to 40. I believe in part the resilience of Trump's numbers comes because not all Trump voters are alienated by or attracted to the same things about the president. This is another one of these. The Trump base is not monolithic. For all the constant churn of the news cycle and the endless stream of outrage, backlash, and bluster, Trump's job approval numbers have stayed surprisingly stable. Lousy, but stable. Part of this is because the calcification of views of Trump among Democrats. Trump hasn't lost ground with the left because he never had any ground. I mean, his approval with Democrats is like in single figures. Yeah. So he's not going to lose much. Obama's numbers fell by a slightly larger amount over his first few months because he enjoyed more support from Republicans at the beginning. We never gave Trump that support. So that wasn't there to erode. But I suspect part of this has to do with the ideological diversity and varied interests of the Trump coalition. A new study out from Democracy Fund's Voter Study Group, Roy Teixeira and others participated in this. A research coalition that she advised covers a great deal of ground explaining and understanding who, what, why, how of the 2016 election. In the study, Cato Institute scholar Emily Eakins lays out typology of the Trump voter. And the way they have it, and I gave you the page, is that each one of the different participants, like Roy Teixeira, who, you might not groan about,
no,
has a little article about, here's the part of this that I'm focusing on, to give you an idea. Political divisions in 2016 and beyond by Lee Drutman. The 5 types of Trump voters, Emily Eakins, that's what we're going to talk about now. Race, Religion, and Immigration by John Sides, pointing out that race had a lot to do with what was going on here. The Story of Trump's Appeal by Robert Griffin and Roy Teixeira. But right now, for the purposes of Georgia 6, we're looking at the 5 types of Trump voters. So there are staunch conservatives, largest cluster, 31% of Trump's voter base. These are traditional Republican types. And the thing that Kristen Solis Anderson makes it interesting is she picks a staff person in the White House to associate the types with, so you get a better idea what she's talking about.
Okay.
The staunch conservatives is represented by Reince Priebus.
Okay.
The career party operative fits the mold.
Yes. All right.
Okay? Second largest group is the free marketeers, 25%. These are your Wall Street types, fairly moderate social views, unlike Reince Priebus, who tend to be pro-free trade, pro-immigration, embodied in the White House by either Ivanka Trump or Gary Cohn, the Goldman Sachs guy.
Okay, I mean, that's poor representation, but okay. I can't complain.
After that are the American preservationists, 20%.
Uh-huh.
Staunch conservatives and free marketeers are typical Republicans, while the American preservationists are very less reliable. And that's, of course, Steve Bannon's group. Economically progressive, nativist, ethnocultural conception of American identity. What we think of as the deplorables.
Economically progressive? Is that what?
Well, yeah, they don't mind. They don't necessarily want the social network torn up, if you ask them.
Well,
They're
okay.
the ones who are
Bannon.
saying you have to cut Medicaid.
If you ask Bannon, he'll say, yeah, sure.
That's not their thing. They would, remember Trump on the stump was saying he's going to preserve Medicare, Medicaid, all these promises he's not going to keep.
I guess they don't all exhibit every element of this taxonomy. That's okay. We started off with a taxonomy.
Trump base was far less about the Paul Ryan agenda in Congress about making sure that the rich get taxed less. That wasn't their thing. They were perfectly happy to tax the rich.
Alrighty then. I get that part.
Right? So they're a different group. Then, in equal number are the ones who bring up the rear. The anti-elite, 19% of the coalition, holding more moderate immigration and racial views, but no less anger at institutions. These are the people that hate the banksters. and the sense that Washington isn't working or looking out for people like them. This 19% are the people, and it's the smallest, second smallest part of the coalition, are often the people that Chris Arnott talks about. You know, the economic anxiety ones. They're not by any means the biggest group. The deplorables are bigger at 20%. The free marketeers at 25, and in fact, between them, the staunch conservatives and free marketeers are, 56% of the coalition. And the economically worried are only 19%. So they're there, they exist, they're real, but it's a fairly small group. Now, if you keep going and talking to them, and those are the only ones you interview, you get the impression that it's outsized relative to, the entire big group. But they exist and it's real. And then there's the 5%. Those are the disengaged. They feel detached generally and do not have many strong preferences. I would say that those disengaged are the ones who probably, are just going to be there because they hate everybody, and they're especially happy because Trump dumps on libtards, and they don't really have any coherent sense of any kind of policy because they're disengaged. So she had these disparate groups, and she says, look, if you issue an order to bomb an airfield in Syria, that's going to alienate the Bannon group. And if you pull out of the Paris Accords, that's going to alienate the Ivanka Gary Cohn group. But they don't move much because bombing Syria may get pushback and unhappiness from the Bannon group, but not from everybody else. And the Paris Accords might get pushback from the free marketeers, but not everybody else. And so the things that frustrate one piece of Trump's coalition often endear him or embolden him with another wing. So, if you're a staunch conservative and you bomb Syria, you think that's great, and you pick up a couple of points. And you lose a couple of points in the Bannon wing, and you basically stay stable, and that's how it works. So you lose a few supporters here with everything he does, but you gain a few more from some other part of the coalition with what he does. And as long as they continue to trust that he's doing something for them and fighting for them, whether it's true or not, the coalition basically stays stable. Again, at 40%, way below what you would normally need to win, but nonetheless stable. And so that's her point. Now, she says, with all of this, you still need to deliver for each one of those groups. So it's a reminder that we're only, 150 some odd days in, and it's not after 4 years or 3 years. There's a limit to how this coalition holds together. There's a limit to when they expect to see stuff delivered for them. But at least in the beginning, at least for now, and we see it in Georgia 6, okay, well, they're not happy with healthcare, but then again, it doesn't affect them as much as you would think because they weren't an expansion state. Okay, they care about, other things, but then they don't care about these other things. And as a result, they're still willing to say, okay, for the most part, sticking with the tribe. And so that's, in the end, how Karen Handel, who wasn't a particularly popular candidate, winds up winning.
Yeah. Well, that's really, it does describe it describes their coalition, I think, pretty well. Of course, it describes well, Abby disagrees, but it does describe all coalition politics. That's exactly the dynamics you're talking about. You just want to put together a coalition that compensates for itself when you lose people along the way for one issue or another. So, not a new phenomenon, but a good description of this one. If you don't mind my saying so, I guess you do. All right. Well, are you on mute, or is Abby still going crazy? Is that what's happening there? It must be. Or else she's chewed through the wires. I'm not sure which. At any rate, okay. Well, seem to have lost your audio there, Greg. If you have more to add and you can't hit every button. There you are.
I had to go get the door.
Oh, I see.
You heard the doorbell go off, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I heard that. I wasn't sure how long that was lasting.
Well, that was Fred. Fred brought over some fresh lettuce.
Well, he should learn to do that after...
We trade, We make soup, and he makes he grows vegetables, and we trade. This is how it works in rural America. Let me explain for you, cities.
I see. Oh, okay.
Because everybody looks out for everybody else here.
By God, where's Chris Arnett? He should be asking you questions about this thing.
I know. I could be interviewed. But anyway, sorry I dropped
right.
out there for a minute,
You're
but
permitted to do
that's
that.
the basic big picture there. So what do you think?
Well, as I was commenting, I think that it's pretty descriptive of this particular coalition. I think that's correct about this. But I was just pointing out that this is the way all coalitions work. If they work at all, and if they don't work, then you don't have a coalition. But it all works this way. Sometimes you lose people over one issue, but as long as it's not the majority of the coalition you've sewn together, you go on to fight another day, and then the next issue alienates some other portion and brings back a different one. So, not a new phenomenon, but it seems like a solid description of the component members of this one. Although
Right, they're
I
not
wonder whether she
monolithic,
understands
and if you want to pick off parts of the coalition, you can. Now, there's some of them that you're never going to be able to, and that should be recognized. But at the same time, it helps to answer the question, how come this one thing happened and why doesn't everybody hate Trump?
Yeah.
Well, because it's a moving target. It's a moving group of people. It's not like a solid thing that just sits there that you chip away at.
That's true. And I think it certainly doesn't hurt him that, one of the elements I think is possibly being underestimated on, say, like the Bannon wing is how heavily invested the Bannon wing tends to be in Trump, the personality. Mm-hmm. And I think they're more forgiving than perhaps other, not necessarily all members of the coalition, but they're among the more forgiving, in that they're basically able to wave away contradictory policy or happenings of any kind with, well, Trump works in strange and mysterious ways. He's still, our Papa Bear, and we don't really care what he says or does, just so long as he sticks it to the libs when he does.
Right, and that's kind of a unifying thing, just like running against Nancy Pelosi and San Francisco values. So I'll give you one last piece before I go, and this is a segment from Jennifer Rubin's column on the election yesterday. There's 3 lessons we might tentatively extract. First, we're seeing the parties divide on class and educational lines. How quickly that takes place and how effectively each party is able to find new voters while holding on to a chunk of its existing electorate will determine the results in 18 and 20. Second, both sides have nearly 18 months before the real midterms. Rather than dwell on Georgia 6, both would do well to intensify recruitment and use the remainder of the year to drive home their policy messages. And finally, we should remember the single biggest determinant of midterm results is the favorability of the sitting president, and right now that should keep Republicans up at night. Democrats can take solace in seeing their candidate vastly overperform in what should be easy seats for Republicans. Nonetheless, nothing competes with tallying an outright win. A Democratic victory would have sent a wave of panic through GOP ranks. I'm disappointed that they're not having a wave of panic through their ranks. A loss leaves them anxious, if not a bit exasperated. And for now, that's where it stands. Republicans averted outright disaster, but all those other things still there.
All right. Yeah, boy, this is my Twitter timeline is just filling up with the hot takes, and the hotness is overwhelming. But
yeah, it is. I mean, like I said before, people are going to have a lot of hot takes, but about 98% of them are going to be. I always thought this, and now that I see the election results, you see, I was right. So with that, I'll leave you and listen to what you have to say, because I didn't let you talk much.
No, I don't know. I don't have anything.
Except when the doorbell went off.
Right. Oh, and then it was me saying hello.
Abby went to play with Fred. That's very important.
That's good.
So take care. And today's Wednesday. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have some more hot takes tomorrow, and we'll see what's going on. Is Joan with you today?
Yeah, I expect so.
Because we'll find out a whole lot more about healthcare and what's going on. I started my segment with that piece. I think it's the driving piece for the week, despite what happened last night. And again, I don't want to lose fact of the sight that South Carolina was an amazingly close race that nobody expected. And, one of the funny things to think about is, did the Republicans win in Georgia 6 because we spent so much attention making them pay attention? And did the Democrats do quite well in South Carolina because nobody was paying attention?
I guess, there's something for everybody.
There's something for everybody there. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks. See you then, Greg. Yeah, I'm having difficulty on the fly discerning at a glance whether I think a hot take is going to be the good kind of hot or bad kind of hot. Can't tell. People trading shares. I did see this. This was interesting. progressive, I guess, Virginia, VA, that's what there we go. So looking at the Twitter bio, it is in fact for Virginia. I guess I have to be careful about everybody's abbreviations now, but Progressive VA Kindler is the name attached to the account, the address of which is progressive_VA. Good point being made here about the Politico article. I guess this is the headline of it. This is being tweeted around. Trump spikes the ball after Georgia election win. And Kindler here pointing out media must, and it's not that they must, and they won't, I can promise you. But we'll go ahead and provide this context. I think it's interesting context. Media must provide context, he hopes, that gives news meaning. In other words, what's this spiking the ball stuff about? Really? Trump chose appointees. And remember, we're talking here about the Georgia 6 election was to replace Tom Price, who he picked to head HHS. Trump chose his appointees from safe GOP areas. His toxicity made their seats competitive. And I guess that's worth considering, too. I mean, it's a smart political play, obviously, and it comes into play for Democratic presidents as well as Republican ones. If you're going to be choosing nominees for your cabinet or other high government positions from among the ranks of those in Congress, as is frequently the case, then those seats will become vacant, and there'll be special elections or appointments made, depending on which house you grab them from. And if you're going to want to keep an eye, especially when your margins in Congress are thin to begin with, on whether or not you are selecting people for the job who would put that seat in jeopardy. If you select someone from your party who is just a local phenom and inexplicably is able to hold that seat in the face of ordinarily high or rising opposition from the other party, that they may snatch that seat away in a special election, you want to think twice about whether or not you really need that person in your cabinet. It does happen. We've seen it happen. And he made strategic choices, or rather, I guess I should say, and my guess is that strategic choices were handed to him, and he made a selection from among, a list of people, and that's the way a lot of such decisions are made, but it's probably a process that's accentuated with him because he doesn't start with any basic ideas about who he wants about anything, at least not from government. He never paid any attention to it. But good point. All the special elections were likely for that reason to be in heavily Republican districts, and they were all likely then to be lost in the special election contests by the opposite party. But Trump's toxicity enabled a lot of fundraising and motivated what base there was for the opposite party, the out party being the Democrats in this case. And they came out and made the races competitive. I think that's, it's a short take. I'm happy with that. And it's, hot enough. We can throw it in the mix, and, I'll leave it at that. I see another piece here, which, because it's Jonathan Chait, has the potential to be, less friendly hot in its taking. But, I don't know. We'll hold that one close to the vest for now and, see if we can mine it for interesting details perhaps later in the week. In the meantime, we do ordinarily expect to hear from Joan on Wednesdays sometime in the 10 o'clock hour. That would be coming up in the next, 5-10 minutes before we hit the top of the hour. For those of you listening via podcast who have no idea what time it is, it's like being in a casino listening to this podcast. You're a winner to start with, and you have no idea what time it is. And I think that's probably the end of the comparison. But we'll hang out and wait on that one. Let's see, what other fun things have we got to note? By the way, I have to check in on this one. There's another note out there, just sort of weird data point for those of us who keep at least one eye on climate change situation. Is this really the case? I've been hearing this for a couple of days, so I decided to look up in Google News what can I find about this? USA Today seems like a good, USA Today is my favorite source to turn to when I have like 15 seconds to find out whether something that a lot of people are talking about is really a thing or not, but that's all I need to know. And, that's the case here. It's so hot in Phoenix, they can't fly planes. Have you been hearing this one too? I had heard that, that they were canceling flights in and out of Phoenix, Arizona airport because temperatures are so high there. And I couldn't quite grasp whether it was really, I mean, can jet planes not function in temperatures that high? And it turns out that I guess regional jets in particular have that difficulty. I had no idea. The extreme heat forecast for Phoenix on Tuesday, that would have been yesterday, so it's not a forecast anymore, but okay, has caused the cancellation of 20 American Airlines flights out of Sky Harbor International Airport. Sky Harbor, that's very cute. Okay, according to a statement from American Airlines, the American Eagle regional flights use the Bombardier CRJ aircraft, which has a maximum operating temperature of 118 degrees. Tuesday's forecast for Phoenix included a high of 120 degrees, and the flights that are affected were to take off between 3 and 6 p.m. Mountain Time, I guess the hottest part of the day. Customers affected were told to contact American Airlines for rebooking options or to request a refund. Extreme heat affects the plane's ability to take off. Hot air is less dense than cold air. And the hotter the temperature, the more speed a plane needs to lift off. A runway might not be long enough to allow a plane to achieve the necessary extra speed. American Airlines alerted travelers on Saturday about the heat wave and recommended they change any flights scheduled to arrive or depart between 3 and 6 p.m. on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Flight changes would be free of charge. This is reminiscent, for them anyway, not for me, it's news to me, of Phoenix's record-setting high temperature of 122 degrees on June 26, 1990, which grounded some airlines for the day. Larger jets, such as Airbus and Boeing, aren't expected to be affected by this week's heat. No explanation exactly for that one. Are they capable of reaching runway speeds necessary to take off in hotter air without running out of runway? Is that essentially what the difference? It's interesting. I would have thought that the smaller jets could get up to speed faster because they're smaller, but maybe they don't have the engine kick. It's interesting that the larger jets are actually able to get up to speed faster. Well, I don't know. I'm not an aviator, so this one doesn't make immediate sense to me, but that's my best guess. But what a weird thing. That had never occurred to me as a possibility, and probably not to you either, unless, I'm sure there's some segment of our listenership which are climate change hawks and aviators. It's possible. Anyway, that was just really kind of surprising to me, and another of the strange effects of global warming that I guess you got to keep your eye on. It's all a hoax, except when you can't fly in and out of Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, I heard that story, and I guess part of me was thinking maybe they should just stop people from flying in and out of Phoenix, because you're going to die when you get here. It's so hot. You won't even be able to survive. So we're just going to stop shipping people in here. The county coroner is asking us to stop flights just to keep them from overloading with people dropping dead from heat exhaustion. But that's not it. The planes literally can't fly. I wasn't sure whether it had something to do with the engine temperature, but I figured jet engines have got to get a lot hotter than 118 degrees, don't you think? But air density, that's the thing. You learn something new every day. Okay. Well, that's all there is we should just stop since we've learned something new. The rest of you who knew that already can carry on with the show. I'm done. And, let's see. What other things might we share before we get underway? Well, I've had a crash. What's crashed? Is it something super important? Okay, Firefox. I actually do need that. Let's restart that. As long as it's not Skype, because if Skype crashes, then I'll miss Joan's call, and we definitely don't want to do that. All right, one of the things that I had put aside that might make a good addition to the show before we hear from Joan, just sort of a place setter, was in we hinted at yesterday that there were a lot of old Republican tweets out there from 2010 complaining about the supposed secrecy, the supposed veil of secrecy under which the Affordable Care Act was being considered and passed. And we saw one from Mike Pence and one from John Cornyn, but apparently there were more lurking out there and people have been working on collecting them. Aaron Rupar has done that for Think Progress. 14 Republican tweets about healthcare that are very awkward now. These tweets, he says, are receipts. Get it? That kind of rhymes. That's nice. So which ones are out there? Of course, I mean, he sets the table here with a nice setup paragraph. Senate Republicans plan to vote on their secret bill to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act next week. On Monday evening, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell signaled that the bill, which is reportedly shaping up to cost more than 20 million Americans their health insurance while cutting taxes for the wealthy, will be subject to as little public scrutiny as possible before the Republican majority forces a vote on it. Word is that a discussion draft of the text, as they're calling it, will be available tomorrow. We'll see whether they live up to that and whether the early rumors about it actually being worse than the House bill hold true. There hasn't been a single public hearing on the plan to reshape 1/6 of the American economy, a plan being drafted behind closed doors by Republicans, and it's not even necessarily the case that it's plural Republicans. It's Mitch McConnell and staff, and apparently we're hearing even from members of that 13-member ad hoc panel that was put together ostensibly to design this thing. They likewise have no idea what's in it, even though they're on the panel. That's what we heard yesterday. It didn't save the article anywhere. It'll probably come up from Mike Lee. He says even he doesn't know what's in this thing. So we'll see about how many people really knew beforehand. This creates an awkward dynamic for Republicans who asserted back in 2009 and 2010 that months of open congressional hearings and floor debate about the Affordable Care Act weren't enough. Senator John Cornyn was among the Republicans we heard about this, pushing for a speedy health care vote this time, but untroubled by this process. But he felt very differently back in 2010. We saw that one yesterday. The people have a right to know what is happening behind closed doors with secret HC healthcare negotiations. There's also a subsequent tweet a week later. How about the rest of America that was excluded from secret talks? White House. He's commenting on the headline, White House nears deal on health care. So did then U.S. Representative Mike Pence. We saw that one yesterday. Let's skip down then to the ones that would be new to us. Back in 2009, Chuck Grassley said it was essential for Americans to watch the the public committee hearings, noting that it affects 1/6 of the American economy and is a big lift for Congress. Let's see. Oh, and of course, in characteristic Chuck Grassley style, he writes, if you have time, watch Finance Committee during amending process of healthcare. Affects 1/6 economy and every AVRY American. Big lift for Congress. He packed a lot into that one. But last week, Grassley signaled he's prepared to vote for the AHCA without a single public hearing being held about it. It's unclear whether John McCain will vote for the AHCA. He likely will, though he left the door open to doing so during an interview with Vox last week. In 2009, however, McCain characterized passing a health care bill without giving the people a chance to read it is a, quote, disgrace. This is how he said it. Democrats about to pass health care bill that no one's read. Where's the transparency? What a disgrace. McConnell, now working to rush a vote on the AHCA with as little public scrutiny as possible, took a very different line back in 2009, as did the Twitter account for Senate Republicans, tweeting their video, Mitch McConnell, Dems wrote healthcare bill in secret and are not sharing it with Republicans. Ooh, how horrible of them. The House Republican Twitter echoed this talking point, this time through a quote, I guess, from Representative Dave Camp. The health care of every American is too important to risk on secret negotiations on this 1,000-plus page bill. We'll see how many pages they've got. Maybe that's the big difference. So did a number of House Republicans who spoke out about the need for transparency then, but are silent about Senate Republicans' total secrecy about AHCA now. Vern Buchanan among them. Congress should not draft the health care bill in secret. All conference committee meetings should be open to the public. For some reason, he capitalized every single letter, or every single word in that sentence. I don't know whether that was a headline he was quoting or what. There's a link. I guess we could find out, but I don't care enough. Kathy McMorris Rogers has one here. We deserve openness and transparency in the health care bill negotiations, not more secret backroom deals. Don't you agree? Don't you agree, Kathy? I guess not. Representative Walter Jones, who likely actually does agree, and probably was actually angry about the House one too. Why? So maybe he shouldn't be included in this. But anyway, it's here. He's Republican. It works. The American people do not want health care reform negotiated behind closed doors, and neither do I. And he might actually mean that. The Ways and Means Republicans, back in October of 2009, tweeted, Ranking Member Dave Camp, it's the same damn one, except this time they didn't capitalize every word. Healthcare is too important to be written behind closed doors. I guess they must have put that out as a press release later on, and he grabbed the headline of that and used it as, all right, well, whatever. Back in 2010, there was also then Congressman Tom Price decrying secrecy and urging more transparency surrounding the Affordable Care Act. With Democrats discussing health care in secret, they're sacrificing the trust of the American people. And a second quote here, a second tweet. When it comes to a health care bill this bad, a little sunlight could go a long way. Of course, he can just excuse the sunlight on this one because the AHCA is a great health care bill, even though it doesn't have anything to do with health care. But as Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services, Price has been speaking out in favor of the AHCA, of course, while acknowledging he hasn't even read the bill. No one has. He's not the only Trump administration official who bashed a closed-door approach to healthcare negotiations back in the day. Consider this tweet from Linda McMahon, who unsuccessfully ran for U.S. Senate before becoming Trump's Small Business Administration administrator. Here's the text of the tweet. The future, this is also all capitalized for some reason. The future of America's healthcare is too important to be decided in secret. Okay. Confronted with their old tweets and statements, Republicans have no answers. No, not surprising, really. As recently as March, Senator Rand Paul blasted the fact that House Republicans weren't making an early version of the AHCA available for public review, tweeting, I've been told that the House Obamacare bill is under lock and key in a secure location and not available for me or the public to view. But of course, with an opportunity to repeal and replace Obamacare quickly approaching, Paul is now playing the false equivalency game. Todd Zwillich catching up with him and tweeting this. Senator Paul decries healthcare process, but informs reporters Dems did, quote, exactly the same thing. Told that's untrue, he says, I'm not going to debate you. So at least he recognizes that there would be no point in debating about it, but I guess he just ran away instead. A couple other lines here. Let's see. There's also one more member here. During a CNN interview Tuesday morning, Senator Mike Rounds, who I'll, I guess, have to remind everybody is a Republican from South Dakota, because it's hard to remember that guy, was asked to respond to Cornyn's 2010 tweet about the people having a right to know what's happening behind closed doors. He could do little more than acknowledge that times have changed. Would you at least grant there's a touch of irony? A CNN anchor asked him. No question about it, I think there is, Round said with a smile. At least there was that. That's surprising, really. I mean, I actually kind of half expected to hear him say, no, not really. I don't know what you're talking about, and leave it at that. I'm not going to debate you, and walk away. Anyway, we're not here to debate Joan McCarter either, thankfully, but we are here to hear what she has to say. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning, Kagro. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. I can't debate that. So, yeah, it looks like things will go pretty smoothly. How are things there?
Sunny.
Yeah, it's a good day for sun. There's a lot
It
of
is a good day for sun.
So we'll be hearing a lot about that one, no doubt. And the subject of the week so far, at least with the focus on Congress, has been, okay, now details are beginning to somewhat, or they're being rumored anyway, leaking out about the Senate version of their tax bill that has the healthcare word stuck to it so that we all think it's about healthcare. Instead, And I mean, I saw something yesterday. I didn't really even get a chance to review it, but it's beginning to look like the rumors are that somehow they've actually made their bill worse than the House bill.
Yes, they indeed have.
How could this be with all the moderates and whatnot that they have over there?
They are making even deeper cuts to Medicaid than were in the House bill.
And yet this is a health care bill.
And yet. Yeah.
Supposedly. Okay. Well, what are we learning about this stuff and the substance of it? And, I mean, I guess.
Well, first I want to rant a little bit about Republicans.
That is permissible.
And about the DC media and how they're handling these Republicans.
By all means.
Because we've seen senator after senator grouse about how they're being shut out of the process, how they don't know what it's in the bill, from Susan Collins to John McCain to Mike Lee, who's supposedly on the committee that's drafting the thing.
Yes.
All griping about how they don't know what's in it. They don't know what to tell their constituents. No one in at least the DC media that I've seen has said, what are you going to do about it? They're letting them off the hook. Any one of these Republican senators can find another two who are not happy about this and who are willing to say they're not happy about this and do something.
You would think.
Like demand a hearing.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I do see people positing that, but it is weird how, I mean, there's a very definite divide in, though they're both media and both DC based, big divide between, say, the magazine-based guys and online writers. Brian Beutler, I know, makes a point of saying it, and many others. But then versus your day-to-day columnists covering Congress for the big traditional media outlets, not really so interested in posing that question to them.
No.
Although we did see, I mean, it was a very interesting thing we got last week about some aggressive interviewing about the situation, about the secrecy and the contents of the bill, and what are you going to do in terms of finding out? That was put to them by a couple of the Vox reporters last week, and we
Vox
just kind of
has been better about it.
We got these very
Much
weird
better.
dodge answers. It was terrific in exposing the just the complete lack of internal logic in the dodging that people were doing. But
again, Vox was not saying, so are you telling McConnell you're not going to vote against this bill unless you are included in the process?
Yeah, nobody's doing that. And I had to...
Nobody has asked yet, what are you going to do about it?
And it should not be a mystery to senators how they can leverage this stuff, although I was guessing yesterday about, why it might not be effective. And I suppose it's possible that some senators have approached McConnell and said this, and McConnell has had a pretty good answer for shutting them down, and then they've backed off, and it's something that they don't feel like they can explain to reporters. But somebody should answer at some point why that's not working.
And why have we not seen any group of them come together yet to say, hey, we're going to stick together on this? We've got 8, 10 now complaining about it.
Yeah.
Really enough to create a gang.
Yes, we know that that's the case.
Safety in numbers to stand against McConnell.
Yeah. I guess
there's plenty of them.
Underlying it all, I suppose what's supposed to be revealed in this is that they don't oppose this. That's all there is to it.
Right. This is giving them a chance to complain about it, to pretend to their constituents that they're very concerned and that they might oppose it and that they're really looking out for their constituents. And so what we'll see is a draft discussion released tomorrow, and people will bleat things about it. The conservatives will say it's too conservative. The moderates will say it's...
They'll say too conservative.
Right. The reverse. Too conservative. The conservatives will say not mean enough.
Yes.
McConnell will make a few tweaks. One side or the other will get to say, well, my concerns have been answered. I stood up for my constituents. two of the other faction will be allowed to not vote for it because he can bring in Mike Pence to break the tie.
Yeah.
My guess for the two who aren't going to vote for it are Murkowski and Collins.
That's what I had heard, or what I was seeing in much of the write-ups, and I couldn't disagree. I have my doubts. Of the two of them, I doubt Collins the more. Murkowski seems pretty set against it, and it's a lot easier. I don't know. Murkowski usually has I think it's an easier thing for her to get a quick read on her constituents because they all live in like two cities. I mean,
right.
It's a huge state and all, but there's 15
well,
people
and because at least what we know of the House bill, and that's all we can go by, and we understand that probably 80% of this bill is going to be what was the House bill. We don't know for sure. Alaska's going to really be screwed.
Yeah. So they got a pretty clear, and they can usually tell most things screw Alaska, to be honest, with the exception of maybe energy bills.
Right.
But it's expensive to live up there, and anything that's going to monkey with prices one way or another. Alaska's, even if it's going to cut prices, Alaska's prices won't be cut as much as the rest of ours. If it's going to raise prices, they'll go up twice as much in Alaska as they do here because it's disconnected from the United States and a million miles away. Getting things there is expensive. So it's usually pretty clear about that. And Collins just, she more frequently masquerades as the concerned party and then turns around and does it. Not quite as much as
we'll
McCain.
See if Planned Parenthood defending stays in it.
I'm sorry, what?
Planned Parenthood defending.
Yes.
That will be the key for Collins, I think.
I could see that. All right. I hadn't considered that as heavily as I ought to. Yeah, she's been pretty consistent there.
One alternative is they keep Planned Parenthood out of it. They're floating these Medicaid deeper cuts in order to outrage moderates, or so moderates can say they're outraged, and then they'll turn around and not do that. So the moderates can say, look, we saved Medicaid, even though, of course, they didn't. Mm-hmm. But they prevented the worst stuff from happening to Medicaid. And then he loses Mike Lee and Rand Paul. And gets Pence to come in and break the tie. So, I hate to sound so pessimistic about it, so cynical, but I think the fix is in. I think that this is going to pass next week.
It's very difficult to imagine it falling apart. Although I took note, along with everybody else who was watching the media yesterday, that I guess they had some kind of a conference meeting. That's funny because
the Tuesday lunch.
Conference. Yes, and that there was some reporting at the exits, essentially, that there were some other members who were saying that they were at least tentative no votes on the bill, and for various reasons. But that's likely to fall apart. This is, of course, the beginning of the negotiations process where McConnell begins to try to patch together the bill that will stand as that coalition. That I lose this one on this issue, but I get these two back with it, and how can I get to 50 so that Pence can do the dirty work and give us the 51st and put us over the top. I saw at least one list that was circulating had 7 potential no votes. Capito, Collins, Cruz, Lee, Murkowski, Paul, Sass, and had Heller, Cassidy, and Portman as undecided. Which this late in the game is not good for you if you're Mitch McConnell, but I have a feeling that part of that meeting was, okay, the following senators may go outside and tell people that they are tentative no's.
Exactly.
And
then we do the negotiating and we see who gets what and who can say, oh, my concerns were answered. Yeah.
So we'll see. I was speculating yesterday that maybe one of the difficulties in getting the process opened up with objections, where a relatively small coalition of Republican senators could theoretically tell the leadership that they were going to vote no unless the process was opened up. Well, for one thing, at this date, once once we and the media sort of got the sense that, oh yeah, 3 senators could get together and derail this thing unless there were open hearings. I'm sure at this point, if they brought that up, McConnell was prepared to then say, well, let's not go crazy here. I'm going to give you a draft on Thursday.
Right.
You'll notice that nobody says, well, it's too late to repair the fact that there have been no hearings. The American public is going to be in the dark. We're going to cry about that, and you're going to read it and say, see, they're on our side. And then we'll get a discussion draft, and then I'll be able to tell you some things about it. But there's no curing having skipped the last year on hearings. So no discussion.
But they'll gloss over that.
Yes, that they'll be willing to forgive. And then, but there was this other strange dynamic of, if you're McConnell, I mean, if you're just thinking as a pure power player at this point, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 senators come to you and say, listen, I'm so unhappy about the process that I might be a no vote on this thing unless the process opens up. And so I want you to do something about that. Okay, what do you want me to do about it? I want to have hearings, or I want the bill text released earlier, or something like that. At that point, McConnell would then say, so let me ask you something. You want me to do this thing. I want to do it this way. I want to do it secretly. You want me to do it less secretly. What am I going to get for doing it your way? In other words, you're telling me you're a no on the bill because of process. There's very little I can do to cure the process for real now. I could release a text to you for discussion purposes on Thursday. I don't know if that's enough for you. But unless you're going to tell me I'm just kidding and I'm really a yes, I just need this cover for my constituents, then I'm not going to change the process I prefer. Even if there are, you 5 say you're going to vote no, vote no. I mean, I would rather you didn't, but if you're telling me you're going to threaten to kill the bill that I'm working on, I'm not going to do you a favor.
The Obamacare repeal that you have been promising your constituents that you would do for the past 8 years.
So go ahead and tell everybody you just changed your mind on that because of the process. I'll get you through the process. Next week, no one will care anymore. They'll stop reporting about it. It's a done deal. And I mean, hopefully we won't forget, but from their perspective, who cares whether we forget? But, I mean, there's nothing on offer to McConnell unless people are really secretly yes votes, but are just upset about the process, in which case I could give you this Band-Aid. But if you're actually a substantive no or possible no on the bill, why would I grant you this favor of opening up the process in exchange for your demands? A no is a no. Right. I don't need you. Right.
And, he can tell them, well, you can get all of the amendments you want.
Yeah, there's also that.
Although I think Brian Schatz had a speech on this on Monday night when the Senate the Senate Democrats did their talkathon. And I think he's probably right on process. What we'll see is the House bill come to the floor and the amendment process opened up for it. And then at the end of, the votorama on all of these amendments, McConnell will put in the substitute amendment.
Yeah.
That's going to be his bill.
Right.
Which can't be amended then.
Right. And which you won't have seen, and which coin toss as to whether or not it matches in any respect the discussion draft released tomorrow.
Right.
I'll release a discussion draft tomorrow too. It's the text of Green Eggs and Ham, and on next Thursday, a week from the release of that discussion draft, at 11 p.m. in the 20th hour of debate on the reconciliation bill, I'll pull out the actual bill that I kept hidden for you for an additional week. That is the last possible word on this thing and is a complete substitute for the garbage that's on the floor now. Ha ha, fooled you. And that's we discussed that as sort of like the ultimate hardball doomsday scenario in terms of how long can they really keep the bill text secret? And the answer is, if they tell you that what they're giving you tomorrow is the bill text, you can't prove that it's not until it isn't.
Right. And until it's too late to do anything about it.
So, well, I guess.
Which I think Mitch McConnell is more than capable of doing.
Sure. It's not done, except when it is.
Yep.
Yeah, I was talking about that too. It's the sort of thing that while it's out there and everybody knew that was a possibility. Had you suggested that the Democrats handle a reconciliation bill that way to Harry Reid, he would have said, "Yeah, I understand your desire for really sticking it to Republicans. I'm with you on that from time to time, but it's not done here in the Senate.
Yeah.
We don't do those things. Oh well, we don't do those things.
We don't do those things. Mitch McConnell is capable of doing anything.
Right. So I think they definitely hit it on the head earlier this week as people were pointing out. I think it was Norm Ornstein tweeting with special thanks to all of the media types who have told us for the past decade or so what an institutionalist Mitch McConnell is and what respect he has for the process and norms of the Senate, and we can't risk alienating him by, being aggressive ourselves because, by gosh, he would never do such a thing. Yeah, he would. He was waiting for his opportunity to do it.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah. Not new, so.
Not new at all. After watching him blockade Merrick Garland.
Yeah. Well,
and then go nuclear on Supreme Court nominations.
Mm-hmm.
What's left? I mean, the legislative filibuster will go, I'm sure.
When necessary.
But in terms of this reconciliation bill, yeah, he'll happily object to whatever the Senate parliamentarian rules against him and overrule the parliamentarian. I really, at this point, I am having a hard time seeing how we derail this, how we stop this. Because we have to count on Republican senators to do it, and we don't have very good track record of Republican senators standing up to Mitch McConnell.
No.
Unless they're allowed to.
That it happens from time to time, but not very often. I ultimately
last time it happened was when he was sort of irrationally pushing the Patriot Act. Remember? 4 years ago, I think? 4 years ago? He wanted to sort of reinstate warrantless wiretapping. And push a Patriot Act that wasn't changed. And
I don't recall it quite as clearly.
That was one of his really sort of massive losses. That was a big surprise. The surprise was that he pushed it so hard.
Yeah.
But at that point, there were Democrats and Republicans in opposition. So there was a good coalition against him. This time it's Republican against Republican, and I don't think when it comes down to it, when it's Obamacare repeal, that any of them, more than two of them, will break.
Well, it's doubtful, and for whatever reason, they all feel like they need to deliver on passing something, and I guess they would deliver in the repeal part of the promise, and I don't know how many people really ever believed them on the replace part anyway, so maybe they're feeling okay about it.
There is a wild card still out there,
No.
and that's whether Trump really hates this bill.
I guess it is possible. Ordinarily, you would say, well, no president would. Once this so-called win had been engineered, why would you jump in the way and ruin it? And then you realize Trump may have no idea what he's doing. So it's entirely possible that even if he's being advised from all corners to jump at, to simply stay out of the way.
He's calling the House bill mean.
Yeah.
He said that he's not liking the way the Senate bill is shaping up and that he wants it to have heart, whatever that means, more heart. What if Trump looks at all of the bad press this gets and says, I'm not going to do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't think that's going to happen, but it's Trump.
Yeah, it's hard to read.
Anything could.
Right. I guess because it's such a dumb idea to try and step in and say, well, I'm, what you're going to, I'm sorry, did you say you're vetoing it because it doesn't have heart? But what does that mean? What are you talking about? Ordinarily a president would say, yeah, that's dumb. I can't do that. But
well, the
this
other
guy.
part is that they're sort of dissing him publicly. Had a story yesterday. Mitch McConnell sent out one of his surrogates, a non-congressional surrogate, a key Kentucky Republican who helps him on messaging and stuff, to say, yeah, they don't really take Trump's statements like this very seriously. You know, his tweets and stuff, this is just an administration that communicates differently, and we don't put a lot of stock in that. That may have been a mistake.
Maybe. Although they're always telling us, well, don't take him this way or that way. What do they used to say? Don't take him literally, but take him seriously? Or was it the opposite? That didn't make any sense. I can't remember. But maybe that's in compliance with their view, but it could change at any moment.
Is it in compliance with Trump's view?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, was it on television anywhere other than Kentucky? He wouldn't have seen that.
It was in, gosh, was it?
You saw it?
Yeah.
So the internet makes it possible. The question is, if Fox and Friends puts it on and says it's a diss, that's something that they likely could play and say, no, it's super smart, and have Trump say, yeah, super smart. Versus if they say, oh my gosh, but don't you think they dissed the president? Yeah, they dissed me. This is terrible.
Anyway, we can get this on Fox and Friends.
Yeah, well, and we'll have to see what they think of it. But whatever they think of it, he'll just tweet in 5 minutes in all caps and insist that it's true. So they're very influential in that way. I don't know. I'm also a little bit confused still about. I was not certain what Trump was trying to do when he tweeted out originally that the House bill was too mean. I thought that might just be.
Well, no, that wasn't a tweet.
Oh, he said it.
That was his meeting with the senators.
Oh,
remember
okay.
last week, a handful of Republican senators went up to have lunch with him or something.
Oh,
and you got that picture of Murkowski sitting by him with her arms crossed, looking sullen.
Okay. I don't know if I saw the pictures of it, and I've lost track. He eats lunch. So I think he may eat more than one lunch a day, as possible.
I think so.
The meals and meetings with this guy, I just don't think any other presidents have been doing that. I think Obama just, as a matter of habit, made his lunches very business-like. They weren't business lunches. I mean, he ate what he ate as quickly as possible, maybe at his desk, maybe in the dining room. I don't know, but he never seemed to have. Trump loves to meet over meals. For whatever reason. So I've lost track of who he's meeting with.
So he can have his 2 scoops of ice cream while his guest only gets 1, and he can,
That's now a thing, and people want to be able to see that at a meal for some reason. But, so I didn't take note of that meeting, but I did hear the comment, and I just thought that he might be saying that either because I don't know whether he thought that the Senate bill would be more moderate because things often are, or whether he was hoping it would be, or he's a kook and he said it and everyone was like,
I think it's the latter. I think he just doesn't want bad press. He doesn't care what's in it.
Yeah. And I guess he must have found out, and it's just, and so he says it's mean, and we've been lectured any number of times that stop trying to look for the great strategic plays from him. He's not that kind of guy. He just says what he says, and any meaning that's imposed on it comes afterwards. And that could be it. It may just be that he literally never bothered to see what was in the House bill. It was a Republican win, so we'll have a party, because that's what I like to do. When I open a condo building, I have a launch party. No one ever launch parties a condo building, but I will, because launch parties are hot and Hollywood, and it means I can have the Miss Universe girls over here.
Yes.
So I'll do it. And so, all right, I'll have a party. Well, now the bill is mean. You had a party for it. What are you talking about?
You loved it.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't know what it was in it. Now I found out, and it was mean. Well, you know what? This one's going to be even meaner. Oh no, man. What am I going to do? Ice cream. What's on TV?
Exactly.
That's the end of it.
So, yeah, all in all, I don't think we can count on Trump to veto this thing.
No, I wouldn't look for that.
But, you know, Republicans in disarray, divisions between the White House and Congress, it's all good on our side, even if they still are taking health insurance away from tens of millions of people.
Yes, that is bad, and you might be right. I want to go back to the earlier point you made, is that there's very little opportunity to actually, very little reason to have any hope that it would be stopped anywhere along the way. There's just, procedurally, there's not very much you can do in terms of stopping it. I mean, they could decide, hey, let's not pass it, I guess.
I mean, the only thing the Democrats can do is make it as painful as possible.
Yes.
When it comes to the vote-a-rama, they can and should offer up as many embarrassing amendments as they can come up with.
Yes.
But at that point, it's not going to stop it from happening.
No. And eventually, I mean, one other variant on that is just to offer so many amendments that the thing almost literally never ends. It doesn't even have to be an embarrassing amendment. It's just an amendment, and I'm offering it because I want to make you stay here and not vote for final passage. At some point, I assume Republicans then would simply threaten, well, I'm going to just set aside all the rules for the moment, and at some point rule from the chair that any further amendments are dilatory and out of order. And we'll scream because there might be some substantive ones left, but we'll just answer, you've made a mockery of the process, and we're just going to vote. And if we can get more votes than you to make you shut up, and I bet we can because there's more of us than you, then that'll be the end of it. And then we'll pass it, and then it'll be time for the media to write their stories to try to figure out who won and lost here.
Yep.
And they'll be willing to take that because in the end, I mean, while left-leaning journalists will say, terrible bill, awful, embarrassing process, total disaster for the Republicans, and right-leaning pundits will write the opposite, strong win, delivering on promises, etc., then the balance ends up being tipped by the Chris Solitzas of the world who say, the bill passed, and that's all there is to it. Optics, it's a win. And it'll be 2-1, and we lose.
Oh, this is all so discouragingly predictable.
Well, we've seen it before. There's optics for you again. So this is true, but they should be putting up the fight, of course, and the question early on that was asked by, I guess, some staffers pushing back. What's the point of putting up this kind of a fight to delay things by a matter of hours and then lose? And I think, well, you know, for I guess if you're already sitting in a position on a Senate staff where you have all the information you could want and all the ability to actually cast the votes, then you may lose sight of what it's like for the rest of us out here saying, we need some outward sign from you guys that you really understand this. The fact that you get it intellectually is not enough.
No. And the idea that anything that you're doing to not fight this signals that you're okay with the Senate being so damaged.
Yeah.
With the institutional travesty that's happening here.
And
so I do appreciate that we had the talkathon, that Senate Democrats are now using the 2-hour rule to stop committee work, that they're going to be objecting to unanimous consent requests. All of this stuff, it's hard for the public to look at and see anything happening because we're so outcome focused. Right. All of this that they're doing is good, and it has to happen, not just on this bill, but it has to just keep happening.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. It shouldn't end with the passage of this bill, and then we shouldn't then say, all right, well, now we'll go back to having committee meetings and doing things by regular order because all the secrecy will be gone. I mean, once they've learned that they can do this and get something through all the way, I assume they'll just do it again.
Keep doing it, yeah. Tax cuts? Sure. Let's do it. I don't know what's going to happen on debt ceiling. I've been trying not to think about it.
Yeah, not sure. Unless that's another one of those situations where they have the conference meeting and say, look, I need 50. Who's it going to be?
Yeah.
And who's got the best case for voting no on debt ceiling? Anybody want to make the argument? I don't know who would be able to get away with that one at that stage. They'd probably just say, now, we all have to swallow the pill on this one.
Yeah.
So,
and I think probably, as usual, the House is going to be the problem on debt ceiling more than the Senate.
They'll have more. They have more votes in play, and there'll be more competition for the free pass.
Right. And McConnell doesn't need to take hostages here because he's got his president.
Mm-hmm. Ugh. All right. Well, so the outcome is probably a foregone conclusion, unless one or more additional Republican senators simply says, for whatever reason, I just can't make this vote. I can't do it. They'll have a perfectly good explanation for it. The bill is terrible, but they'll have made a lot of enemies, and
I think for our purposes, our focus needs to be Dean Heller, who is the most vulnerable among the 2018 Republicans up. He's got a serious challenger now who's got lots of backing from Harry Reid. And you don't discount Harry Reid's influence when you're in Nevada. So Dean Heller needs to be worried.
That's a good point. I suppose if you, one of the liberating things about coming to the conclusion that there isn't that much that you can do to absolutely stop it without having a Republican come to the rescue is that you can start to plan, okay, well, if you're going to lose, where can we visit the most damage from this loss? And you can start thinking politically and start thinking about which senators are up in 2018 and who's vulnerable and which factors point to whom about where the vulnerabilities lie, and then tailor your message about how it was done.
And you could get then Heller, Murkowski, and Collins. Mm-hmm. And who knows, maybe a Portman. If you have solid objections, you can get some of these, Shelley Moore Capito, some of these people who were worried about the Medicaid stuff. You can maybe peel them away. But again, we're relying on Republicans to save us, and I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the more realistic view of it, but you offer the best counsel you can on how to make the fight the most obvious, and
if you're in Nevada,
people.
Start beating up on Dean Heller.
Yeah, so that's
start
a good
calling
answer.
him.
Well,
every day, all day.
Yes, absolutely true, and here we really do have it really does make a difference for people who live in states represented by Republicans to make those calls. Very often we leave them out because we're trying to, rally them, our Democratic senators as the Democratic base. But, don't forget you're a constituent, and they're going to have to count, and they're trying to count how many of you there are versus how many of their own people they've got in the state. And if they're calling saying yes, and they're not, by the way, because most Republicans actually don't think the bill is particularly good. They might be happy for the political win, but not a lot of support for the bill among Republicans. They're probably not calling saying, you better vote yes. And it makes a difference when your phones ring all the time with no, 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 no. And you can only dismiss it for so long by saying it's just Democrats, because they still live in that state. They
still vote.
Yeah.
And when you have a credible opponent, as Heller does now.
All right. So we encourage our Nevadans to do that.
We do indeed.
And, all right, let's see. Other things on your radar, either congressional
the
or
only
otherwise?
thing on my radar is Trump Care, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, that's understandable.
We should probably also talk about net neutrality.
What? Again? All right.
We don't have an immediate deadline on net neutrality ahead of us, but we are coming up on a day of in action. Another sort of like we did for Sopa Pipa. Remember back in those days?
Yes, which always reminds me of the Mexican restaurant dessert Sopapillas, which is not unpleasant, really. They're delicious. Okay, anyway.
They're delicious.
Yeah.
Shutting the internet down for a day.
Okay.
And there are some really big players that are going to be involved in that. Netflix and Google and lots of folks.
What am I going to do all day?
I know.
When will that be?
See, this is the thing when you have these days and you're talking about them
Can we
and
do that
you're
on Saturday?
pushing them, Daily Coast still has to be open to report
Right.
on them. So,
Hey, that's not happening over there. Just wanted you to know that. That's true.
if I remember correctly, it's July 19th.
July 19th. I will have to
will have
plan some outdoor
I
activity.
have to make absolutely sure of that, but that's what's in my head.
Well, yeah, everyone will have to check your own calendars. We're not giving you this is solid. It's not legal advice. Don't take it to the bank. It's not investment advice. We think it's around July 19th.
And once Trump cares out of her hair, one way or the other, I'll need something else to think about and write about. So that's what it's going to be.
Right. Okay. So we'll see that. I was still expecting then Trump Care to be on the floor next week. Next week will be the last scheduled work week before the July 4th recess. Then, of course, I guess if they can get this thing passed, people might go home. I don't know, but they'll take off for the week anyway.
I would doubt it.
Yeah, they'll probably do some traveling overseas.
Yeah, they'll have important fact-finding missions overseas.
Yes, or in the penthouse suite of a hotel somewhere far away from their constituents, as has been the case, as you mentioned.
Yes.
In the past. And then and I guess at that point, then we'll start to see all the, that'll be the time for columnists to write columns admonishing us for all having ignored net neutrality and being distracted by Trump Care. Okay, it's always a guilt fest for me.
Always a guilt fest.
Find out what I'm not.
There's only so much you can do in a day,
Yeah.
and there's still Russia.
Right. Oh, yeah. So I have heard. Although that was a distraction too. Yes. The Georgia 6th result is because you were all distracted by Russia.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't live in Georgia anywhere. I don't
Never
know how that
mind.
happens. I think about 100 things a day, but I guess the easiest column to write in the world is I didn't talk about this yesterday, which means none of you did, which means you were all distracted because I learned about it at 11 p.m. All right, smart guy, tell me what I missed.
You should be a columnist.
Oh, yeah. Well, then I'd miss everything. It's a tried and true formula, though. That's I'm getting tired of it. But we'll have to live with it. All right. Well, so probably nothing else on the horizon anytime soon. And by the time we speak again next week, we'll be in the throes of this thing. Whether we'll be already in Votorama or just approaching it, I am not sure. I guess it depends on when they
I would
start.
expect we'll be in it. I think he's going to try to start the debate process on Tuesday.
Okay. So
Or the
again,
amendment process, the Votorama. I think he's
the
going to try to
amendments
start Tuesday.
Tuesday, or the bill consideration starts Tuesday? Do you know, are they going to kick it off? The 20 hours of debate is...
Well, he wants the vote on Thursday.
Okay.
Final vote.
Yeah, let's see. So, if I don't know how he's going to handle it. I guess it doesn't really matter. If he plans on cutting things off at some point by just ruling everything dilatory, then you can just start on Tuesday. I suppose it's possible that they may, what they may do is they'll come in on Monday and gavel in and say, listen, you don't have to be here for the 20 hours if you don't want to be, but you got to be here by Votorama time. And depending on when we start on Monday, I could see them doing, start Monday morning, do 10 hours of the 20, knock off for the night, come back and do the next 10 hours on Tuesday, and then start with the amendments.
On Wednesday.
See how things go, and just go around the clock if necessary. Have you, in the course of watching all of this, I keep bringing this question up, but I don't know for sure that I've ever seen Votoramas on a reconciliation bill. It makes sense that they would have to do this way because the procedure is the same as the budget, but I always see Votoramas on budget, And
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen one on reconciliation, but maybe I ignored it. But
I don't remember. They didn't do Votorama on the original Affordable Care Act, which was done by reconciliation.
or at least the sidecar fix, as they
Yeah.
called it back
Yeah.
then. Yeah, you occasionally will run into conservatives on Twitter who insist that the entirety of the bill was passed in reconciliation and in secret and in 10 minutes.
Right.
Whatever. Try to explain it to them. It doesn't work. But, yeah, that's, all right. Well, yeah, I know we didn't do that then. And, reconciliation bills aren't something that we see every year. It's the way we do with budgets, although they occasionally
Although
skip
from
budgets
now on
too.
we probably will.
Yeah. Well, depending on how.
Well, yeah,
they get
depending on
away.
whether he decides to nuke the legislative filibuster.
Oh, yes, that's true. I suppose if you get rid of the legislative filibuster, then that's like a freebie at reconciliation all the time. And you don't even have to worry about the bird bath. Fantastic. They may yet do that. That would then make this the last of the reconciliation bills, I would assume. Just
Right,
as well.
possibly.
No one ever understood it. So,
And we'll see how seriously they take the bird baths.
yeah.
My guess is not terribly.
Yeah, they'll have to pick and choose which. Well, that'll be an interesting competition. Once you decide to throw out the rule book and say to hell with what the parliamentarian says, if you decide to do that, that would make for an interesting conference meeting at that point. Well, wait a minute. So if the rules don't apply, then how come my amendment is getting thrown out and we're changing the rules for that guy's amendment? What about my amendment?
Yeah.
Well, your amendment's stupid. Well, what do you mean? Well, we all said that you couldn't do it because of the bird rule, but the reality is it was dumb, and even if we could do it, we didn't want it. We just didn't want to insult you, but now we got no choice.
Right.
Oh, that's not nice. So, well, we'll see whether that brings any knives out, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But
Again, it's going to be relying on Republicans to throw up roadblocks and
yeah. Well, maybe find all the Republicans who say they're institutionalists, and we can approach them and say,
Orrin Hatch,
oh yeah, well, I mean, he's
Chuck
lying.
Grassley.
He's too dumb. He needs no help. All right. Well, we should identify them, and I guess we could approach them and say, this bill is probably destined to close out next week with either another invocation of the nuclear option or something exactly like it. You won't hang that label on it, but to the extent that you hate that, one way out of this is to simply say, you know what, this bill sucks. I'm the third no vote. Let Trump deal with the fallout. He's the one that promised this thing. I always said we were going to repeal and replace, but I don't know. I've said some of them are there through 2 elections or going through their second election having promised it and never delivered it. I survived the first one. I'll survive the second one.
Yeah.
But if I don't derail this with a no vote on final passage, we're going to have to nuke something just to finish debate on this. And I'd just rather not do that. And to hell with this whole thing. If we can only find
there
that
is
guy.
a dark horse in that vein, I think. Ben Sass.
He does like to play that role.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see him do it for real.
I think that he has greater ambitions. I think he wants to think that maybe he's got his finger to the wind and he can position himself as the next Republican savior if all hell breaks loose on Russia and everything else. And the Republicans collapse. He can say, I was the voice of wisdom, the voice of reason, the moderate. He's been sort of towing that line for the last year or so.
Interesting. Here, a free line for you. Donald Trump without the baggage. It's used, but, you could try that one. Not exactly the image you want to portray necessarily, but it's a possibility. That's a good point and well taken. That maybe that's the guy to work on if either happened to be from, it's Nebraska, right?
Nebraska.
If you happen to be from Nebraska, maybe you would prevail upon him, particularly if you are actually an insider who can speak to someone on his staff, although you're not likely listening to the show if you are, but hey, if this happens to leak out into the wider world, take this advice. Yeah, if you're an institutionalist or want to pretend to be an institutionalist, at some point toward the end of consideration of this bill, there's going to be a very dangerous moment for the future stability of the Senate and the continued existence of the legislative filibuster, generally speaking, although they won't attack it directly. The procedure that they use, if Democrats put up the fight that they should to close out consideration and they'll be doing it, by the way, not only to pass a bill to take away everybody's health care in exchange for tax cuts for themselves, but to take a vacation on time so they don't miss their flights to wherever they're, headed off to on their junkets during the July 4th break. If that's an even trade for you for the future stability of the Senate, then fine. I don't particularly love the Senate institutional rules myself all the time, but you should realize what you're walking into, and if even one of you can be convinced that either you will be the savior of the Senate by doing this or would be feeding your future ambitions, I encourage you to consider it. It's your time, Ben, or someone else. Fill in the blank.
Well, hell, John McCain. If John McCain wants a legacy, McCain, he can be the guy who saved millions of people's health insurance.
That would be super unlikely, but, how much time has he got left?
Would.
Somebody could tell, although it's in his wife. How did his wife get up for a administration job? I found that out recently. Who the hell needs Cindy McCain for anything?
I have no idea.
I'm not certain what even Trump gets out of that. I mean, McCain has knuckled under to him from the start.
Yeah.
What's
it's
the
not
point?
like McCain's really going to put up any obstacle
I really don't know.
ever.
I mean, is Cindy investing in something that we don't know about? A Kushner project or a Trump hotel in Arizona or something? If anybody knows, let us know.
Yes,
and I'll tell you
let us
next
solve
week.
the mystery of Cindy McCain.
I guess so. I can't figure that one out. But then again, I can't figure out they just made Eric's wedding planner the HUD official too. So there's no telling what's going on at this point. We'll see whether we can figure it out between now and next Wednesday, though. Joan, thanks for coming by today.
You are most welcome. We'll certainly have more Trump care to talk next week.
Yes, we'll be in the thick of it, and we're almost there, and we'll get together and tell you the worst of the worst next week. Thanks
Absolutely.
Again. Okay.
Gosh, what a selling point.
Yeah. Huh. I'm going to change that one. It's going to be fantastic, and we're going to have a great time next week. So we'll see you then, Joan.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Take care. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer over at Daily Kos. You can, of course, find it it's one of those internet things, dailykos.com, in case you are solely connected to the Daily Kos universe through our radio programming. It's entirely possible. I wouldn't say I encourage it because you're missing an awful lot from some fantastic writers, Joan, Greg, Armando, who are regulars here. And I would say at this point now it's like a good 24 more who, for some reason, are radio holdouts, although they've made occasional appearances here. We're going to have to see if we can remedy that in the future. Tomorrow we'll be back. Greg will be back for his last appearance of the week. Friday, as it turns out, will have to be an off day, a little bit of travel for me. I'm going to try and prepare something to take you into the weekend as usual. In the meantime, we're going to hand the radio mics over to the guys from the after show for today's roundup of all the stuff that I was unable to touch on because I go into such great detail about everything else in the world. The after show has this for you. The right wing is correct about paid protesters. How do we know this? Because the paid protesters are paid by the right wing. That makes it easy. Mitch McConnell is making a cynical gamble that voters won't punish the GOP for Trump care because voters already hate Congress. There's not that much downside for someone polling at 9% to go with, I guess. And a crushing blow in Sunday's French elections really is the latest blow to Europe's fascist far right. I like to see their hopes crushed. All that and more, plus, of course, Angela Marks on the last half. Next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So do stay tuned for all that goodness, plus, of course, the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast community calendar, and whatever the hell else they might be able to throw at you in the next hour on the after show with Wink and Justice coming up next here on Netroots Radio. Keep it here all day long. We'll see you tomorrow.